Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're heading over to Limerick, Ireland, and really zeroing in on a fascinating object, the Bowles Bridge Square. Now this isn't, just some random bit of metal. It's a brass square, and it has an inscription and a date, 1507, and that date, well, it throws a bit of a curveball.
It really does, yeah. Our exploration today, it's largely guided by this very well-researched paper. It's from Robert Burns Lodge number 59.
Right.
And it really gives us a roadmap, you could say, into understanding this quite enigmatic square, from when it was found, the message on it, and its connection, its surprisingly early connection, to Freemasonry.
Okay, so our mission then, for this deep dive, is really to unlock what this small piece of brass can tell us.
Exactly.
We want to get a handle on the history, the symbolism, and, well, potentially offer you a window into a much earlier chapter of let's say, a well-known historical movement than maybe previously thought.
Yeah.
All right, so this thing, it didn't just, materialize, right? How was it actually found?
Well, the discovery, that's a story in itself. You have to go back to November 1830.
Okay.
The original Bell's Bridge in Limerick, it was being rebuilt. And the architect, the engineer overseeing it, was a brother James Payne.
Ah.
And it was during the work, right down in the foundation of the Northern Land Pier, that he literally unearthed this brass square. It was embedded right there in the old stonework.
Embedded, wow. And when we say small, what are we talking about size-wise? Is it tiny?
Not tiny, but manageable. It's about 5 inches tip to tip. So yeah, just under 6 inches.
Right.
But what's really telling, and the research paper really emphasizes this, is that it was firmly set in the foundation, which, strongly suggests it wasn't accidentally lost or just discarded. It points towards a deliberate placement.
Right at the start of the bridge's life, potentially.
Exactly. Purposeful.
That detail, the intentional placement, that feels really significant. It sort of hints at something more going on. Now, what about the bridge itself? Was it like a new bridge when this square was supposedly put there in 1507?
Well, that's a bit tricky. The exact date the very first bridge was built, we don't have a definitive record for that. Historians are still looking. But we do know from historical documents, going back to 1558, actually, so Queen Elizabeth I's time, that a bridge was definitely there at that spot. And it had a few names over the years. People called it the Tide Bridge, sometimes Bald Bridge, Boyle's Bridge, even Ball's Bridge.
Lots of names.
Yeah. It only got the name Ball's Bridge after 1830, after the square was discovered.
Interesting. So the bridge was definitely around by the mid-1500s, which makes that 1507 date on the square even more intriguing, doesn't it?
It certainly is.
It's like earlier than our first written proof of the bridge itself. And you mentioned the location, the northeast corner. You said that has a specific significance.
Absolutely. Yeah, within Masonic tradition, the northeast corner, that's the spot. It's the traditional place for laying the ceremonial foundation stone for a new building.
Okay.
And it's not just, picking a random corner. It's symbolic. Represents new beginnings, the principles, the whole structure, physical and, metaphorical, is built on.
I see.
And that tradition, it's still very much alive in Freemasonry today. So finding the square, placed just so in that corner. Well, it really implies a symbolic Masonic act right back when the bridge began.
It wasn't just dropped in the cement mix.
Definitely not. It feels foundational.
Okay, this is where it gets really juicy. The inscription. What did it actually say on this square?
Right, the inscription, it's quite clear, and it reads, "I will strive to live with love and care upon the level by the square."
Upon the level by the square. Wow. Those terms, they just scream Freemasonry, don't they?
They absolutely do. Very resonant.
So maybe for listeners who aren't, deeply familiar with all this symbolism, can we unpack that a bit? Let's start with the level. What does that signify here?
Sure. So the level in Masonic symbolism, it's a really potent symbol. It stands for equality, uprightness.
Yeah.
The idea is that everyone, regardless of their job or how much money they have or social standing, they all meet on this common ground, brotherhood.
Right.
It's about fairness, integrity, acting honorably.
That makes sense. A core ideal, really.
Yeah.
And then the square, which is obviously a builder's tool, but clearly means more here.
Exactly. Yeah. A physical square gives you perfect right angles, right?
Yeah.
Essential for building something solid.
Yep.
Symbolically in Freemasonry, it represents morality, truthfulness, Basically, the commitment to living a virtuous life, a principled life.
Squaring your actions.
Precisely.
Wow.
Squaring your actions with what's right and just, aligning yourself with ethical standards.
And the message had more, right? The research mentioned hearts.
Yes, that's another really important layer. There's a heart depicted on each side of the square's outer angle.
Huh.
And that really drives home the importance of, well, love, compassion, care within the Masonic outlook. The heart, it's universal, seat of emotion, affection. It reinforces that this isn't just about secret rituals. It's fundamentally about brotherly love, helping each other out, being truthful.
Okay, so you've got this inscription, the symbols, and that date, 1507. What does this package tell us about when this more symbolic type of Freemasonry, speculative Freemasonry, is that the term?
That's the term, yes, where the focus shifts from actual building to the symbolic meaning.
Right. So when did that start to take root, especially in Ireland? Because, like I said, I think most people think 17th, maybe 18th century for that.
And that's the crux of it. That 1507 date on the Bell's Bridge Square, it just directly challenges that conventional timeline.
Okay.
It strongly, strongly suggests that this symbolic form of Freemasonry was already established, already active in Ireland much earlier. We're talking the very beginning of the 16th century.
Yeah.
Which, pushes the whole accepted history back quite significantly. It makes us reconsider how and when the craft really developed.
This really is forcing a historical rethink. So, okay, the first written proof we have might be later, but this object, this square, is like tangible evidence from much, much earlier.
Precisely. Physical proof.
Can you give us a bit more context on Freemasonry in Ireland generally? Yeah. Beyond this amazing score, what's the bigger picture?
Sure. So while the square is this incredible early marker, the earliest documented reference, like you said, the first time it's written down that we found so far, is actually from a letter in 1688. It mentions a fraternity of Freemasons meeting in Dublin.
Okay, so still quite a gap between 1507 and 1688.
A big gap. But it shows the traditions were clearly around almost 2 centuries before that letter. Then later you get into the 18th, 19th centuries, and Irish Freemasonry really grows.
Right.
The Grand Lodge of Ireland, that gets established in 1725, and becomes really central in, organizing lodges all across Ireland. And lots of prominent Irish figures through history were actually members.
And the research paper, it mentioned a specific lodge with a direct link to the square today. Like, they look after it?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's Ancient Union Lodge number 13. They're based right there in Limerick.
Okay.
And they hold a really special position because, yes, they are the current custodians of Ball's Bridge Square. But what's also fascinating is they're known as a time immemorial lodge.
Time immemorial. What does that mean exactly?
It means their origins actually predate the Grand Lodge of Ireland itself.
Ah.
Their official warrant came in 1732, but everyone acknowledges their existence goes back much further. So they have this direct lineage, potentially right back to these very early Masonic traditions the square represents.
That's quite something, especially when you think about the backdrop, like 19th century Ireland when the square was rediscovered. That was a pretty turbulent time, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You had major social and political change happening, the rise of Irish nationalism, the whole movement for Catholic emancipation, and then, of course, later the devastation of the Great Famine.
Yeah.
And yet, through all that upheaval, Freemasonry, with these deep roots suggested by the square stretching back to the 1500s, it continued, it persisted.
It provided some kind of continuity, maybe.
Perhaps. A framework, certainly, for men from different backgrounds to connect, based on shared ethics, mutual support, even amidst all that external turmoil.
It's amazing what this unassuming little bit of brass has kicked off. So is research still going on? What are scholars trying to figure out now?
Oh, yes. There's still a lot of scholarly interest. People are actively trying to understand more about its creation, Who were the actual Masons involved back then?
All right.
What were things like in Limerick right at that time, early 1500s? Can that shed more light? And of course, just trying to place it more firmly in the wider story of how early Freemasonry evolved.
And I think the paper mentioned comparing it to other old documents, like fitting pieces of a puzzle together.
Exactly that. Scholars are comparing the inscription, the symbols on the square, with what we find in the really old Masonic manuscripts.
Like which ones?
Well, the big ones are the Regis poem, that's way back like 1390, and the Cook manuscript, which is maybe around 1450. By looking closely at the language, the symbols, the philosophical ideas, seeing what matches up, what's different between those texts and the square, you can start to trace how these Masonic ideas developed, how they spread, how they maybe changed over time and place.
It's like historical linguistics, but with symbols and ethics.
In a way, yes. Trying to decode this symbolic language across the centuries.
And the square itself, the physical object,
Yeah.
hasn't been looked after.
Well, Ancient Union Lodge number 13, they fully recognize its huge historical value. So they've put really careful conservation measures in place,
Right.
making sure it's protected from, further damage or deterioration. Their commitment is really vital. And actually, back in 2002, for an anniversary, they commissioned replicas.
Ah, replicas.
Yeah, which is smart. It does two things. Helps protect the original because you don't need to handle it so much.
Right.
And it also lets other people, researchers, Masons, even the public, get a tangible sense of it, connect with it through these high-quality copies.
That's a great idea. So as we kind of bring this deep dive towards a close, what are the main things, the key takeaways you think people listening should hold on to from this story of the Baalsbrick Square?
Okay, well, firstly, I'd say its existence, dated 1507, it's just compelling proof that speculative Freemasonry was likely in Ireland much, much earlier than we used to think.
Okay, the timeline rewrite.
Exactly. It rewrites that chapter. Secondly, the inscription itself, I will strive to live with love and care upon the level by the square. It just lays bare these really enduring moral, ethical principles that have been right at the heart of Freemasonry for, well, centuries.
The core message.
The core message, yeah. And I guess thirdly, the fact that there's still so much interest, ongoing research, and this real dedication to preserving it, it just shows how important this small brass square remains for understanding the whole story of this influential organization.
It really does hammer home how sometimes, quite modest-looking objects can hold these huge historical secrets and totally challenge what we thought we knew. Makes you wonder what else is out there, hiding in plain sight.
It certainly does, and maybe that's a thought for you, listening right now. How often do we just walk past things, overlook objects that might actually hold incredible stories? What seemingly ordinary things around us could, if we looked closer, unlock bits of history or challenge the narratives we just accept. It sort of encourages us to keep our eyes open for those hidden histories.
A great final thought. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the really intriguing story of the Baalsbrick Square.
My pleasure.
And yes, we hope you do ponder what other seemingly ordinary objects might hold some extraordinary significance. Maybe this has sparked some curiosity to look more into Irish Freemasonry or just the symbolism of the level and the square. Until our next deep dive, keep exploring.